Hey, you don't need me to tell you that we are living in a time of great political and economic uncertainty. When you think about January 6th and the aftermath, this abortion decision, which I'll discuss in a moment, the Dow, inflation, what's the answer? For me, in part, diversification, and that includes gold. I don't know why gold gets pitched as being for preppers, like that guy on the battleship that I always see in the commercials, like, oh, the world's going to end. Have gold. No, gold is good for diversification. I believe in, spreading your assets so that you're protected. That's it. And I trust Birch Gold. Text my last name to 989898. They will send you a free, no obligation info kit on gold from Birch Gold. Smerconish gets texted to 989898. 989898. Gang, check this out. Did you ever think you would see this in your lifetime? Pretty stunning, isn't it? Pretty stunning news. I have to tell you, well, actually, let me show you the contrast, because this makes a point that I wanted to about how there is simultaneous joy and sadness in the country today. So I bought them both. You notice the New York Post is radical pro-abortion groups now vow a summer of rage. The New York Times is much more measured. The Times front page is interesting to me because there are so many different aspects and angles to this. Adam Liptak has the byline on sort of the substance. Okay, what did the Alito opinion do? Who supported it? Who opposed it? What was the rationale? What's the argument against it? Then you have analysis by Charlie Savage, who wonders, is this just the beginning? And that's my survey question today at Smerconish.com. I'm asking whether the overturning of Roe versus Wade was a one-off or a sign of things to come, meaning same-sex marriage, contraception, among others. He writes, the Supreme Court's decision on Friday to end the constitutional right to abortion concluded one battle for now, but immediately posed another far-reaching question, whether the judicial ground under rights in other personal matters, including contraception and same-sex marriage, is now also shaky. And of course, the reason why people are nervous about this is that Clarence Thomas, in his concurring opinion, said we ought to look at these other so-called substantive due process rights that have been afforded by the 14th Amendment. Now, Justice Alito said in his opinion that this would not extend beyond the abortion realm. But just because he had that line in doesn't make it so. I don't think that they now pursue what Clarence Thomas would like them to pursue, but obviously one never knows. So there's the substance. There's the question of what next from the Supreme Court standpoint. There is the issue of how it's playing in the country, the simultaneous joy and sadness all across the country. There's also the issue of Brett Kavanaugh and whether Justice Kavanaugh was truthful with Susan Collins and with Joe Manchin. They feel let down. Headline for Collins: decision is a betrayal by Kavanaugh. And then something else that we've discussed extensively in anticipation of this is what impact is it going to have on the midterm election? Is this enough? And I remember what I said a couple of weeks ago. However we're feeling at the time that Roe versus Wade is reversed, if it's reversed, I said then, now it has been, don't evaluate it in the immediate aftermath if you're looking for the political impact. And that would include today. Today there's a lot of emotion out there. In particular, it seems, from the people who are really angry about what just happened. Is it enough to offset the natural advantage that Republicans have going into the midterm as being the party outside the White House and in the climate of record gas prices and record inflation coming out of COVID, just the funk that persists in the country? And that's what people are speculating about. It's interesting. I'll tell you one person who has been praising of the outcome since it was announced, but privately, if you believe the media accounts, Maggie Haberman is the journalist to whom I'm referring, is privately nervous about this because of the impact that it'll have on suburban women, Donald Trump. Yeah, he didn't take a victory lap when the Alito draft was released. Yesterday, he did come out and praise the outcome, obviously in contrast to what we heard from President Biden. But privately, if you believe it, Trump worries this could reverse the tide in suburbia. My own view of this situation is, and I've said this on radio and discussed it extensively, the Roe versus Wade opinion never entirely made legal sense to me. The reliance on trimesters and viability made total practical sense to me. I like the Roe versus Wade standard. It's probably, and I'll say this on CNN today, Roe versus Wade and the way Roe gets to saying at a point of viability, the rights shift. At a point of viability, the rights shift from the mother to the fetus makes great practical sense to me. I think that's the way it ought to be. I'm going to say on CNN today, it's probably the worst outcome except for all the others. I mean, if you have a better standard that you can propose, do it here, and I'd love to read it, if not now, later. If there's a better way to solve the sharp divide, the legal, the moral issues that exist in the country on this, if there's a better way than Roe versus Wade, I'd love to hear it, because I think it's the best. But from a legal standpoint, I have to say that the ridicule and the scorn that I'm hearing Justice Alito subjected to, I think is unwarranted. Yesterday, somewhere in the torrent of reaction to all of this, I saw someone who referred to the mullahs of the Supreme Court as if they are religious fanatics who, guided only by their faith, took this measure into their hand. And this will put me, I'm sure, out of stead with a lot of folks, but I don't see it that way. I read Alito's opinion and find that portions of it have merit. I'm not dismissive of it, but do I like the outcome where it leaves us for half the country? No. No, I definitely don't. I really am concerned about access to abortion in half the country and people who are not of means, and where are they going to be able to go, and the ripple effects of this on employers and healthcare plans. There's going to be a lot of litigation to come, and it's going to take quite some time until all of this gets sorted out. So what I most want to say today is that it's going to be a test for the country, a country that was tested on January 6th, and in the aftermath, and in the time that I've been paying attention and discussing events, which is the last 3 decades, I've never seen us quite at the loggerheads that we are today. And so I'm really concerned and hopeful that those who are joyful today will be mindful of the hurt being felt by those who view the overturning of Roe versus Wade as a tremendous loss and a loss of their personal freedom, and vice versa. You know, these folks need to be mindful of these folks, and these folks need to be mindful of these folks. And the tone of what I'm hearing in some quarters makes me nervous, because I think we can just ill afford further fractioning. So mine's a pitch for reconciliation. These are serious issues. They shouldn't be solved with sound bites. The right outcome, in my view, is, as it usually is, much more nuanced than you're being told from the left or being told from the right. But it requires dialogue and conversation and resolving our differences as we normally do when we close that curtain in a ballot box, and not out on the streets. Streets with protests are fine. Streets with violence have me greatly concerned. So that's it from me, and 5 minutes or less in terms of Roe versus Wade. I liked the law that we had, even though I always thought that the foundation for it in the Constitution was shaky. So There are other things going on in the world that I will address on CNN. By the way, today is my final television program before going on vacation. Yesterday was my final radio program before going on vacation. You can all bear witness to this, that next week, not on radio, but on television when I'm not there, and people say, oh my God, he was fired. See, he shouldn't have had Kellyanne Conway on, or he should have towed the line on how appalling the overturning of Roe versus what. You will know that I told you here first. I'm taking some R&R time with my family. Really looking forward to that. And the radio program will be in great hands with 3 superb guest hosts while I'm away. Anyway, with regard to today's television program, other things that I will get into that interest me. This fella is Rusty Bowers. Rusty Bowers was a star witness at the January 6th committee hearing this week. Rusty Bowers provided some very poignant and emotional testimony. The Speaker of the Arizona State House, who was cajoled and browbeaten by Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, among others. They wanted him to manipulate the outcome of the Arizona election, and he stood up to them. A man of principle, a man of moral fiber and religious faith. Now here comes the surprise. Despite having been asked to do something that he said was illegal by President Trump, if Donald Trump is the nominee in 2024 and should be running against Joe Biden, despite having been asked by Trump to do something illegal, Rusty Bowers says, I'll be voting for him. He'll be my guest. We need to explore that. He reminds me of so many radio callers and some people in my orbit who say to me, yeah, I know he did this, I know he did that, I know he did, but he's better than anything else. It tells me, I think, that these folks are putting politics ahead of the fundamentals of our government. Because if Trump had been successful on January 6th, the rest of this would all be secondary, right? So I'll ask Rusty Bowers that. Speaking of the Donald, I will also have on television a conversation about the Donald versus the Ronald. Is Ron DeSantis Trump without baggage? Is Ron DeSantis Trump without all of Trump's baggage? Maybe that's a way that I should express it. Do we know enough about Ron DeSantis to answer that question? Because if the Rusty Bowers who are out there say, I'd rather have the Trump policy without Trump, isn't that what DeSantis is? I shall explore. And finally, there's this. This was a monumental week this week because the Supreme Court overturned that New York gun ban, for lack of a better description. There was a standard that said you've got to show special cause in New York. Philadelphia used to have that. I met the standard 25 years ago. But you had the Supreme Court action on guns and a Senate bipartisan bill pass on guns. Okay, in that context, you know the line that says the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Ted Cruz said it in the aftermath of Uvalde, but it's not just a Cruz thing. It's a big NRA line. There's data, brand new data that just came out on exactly this issue from the Advanced Law Enforcement Rapid Response Training Center at the Texas State University. So they took a look at 433 active shooter events over a 2-decade time period. And immediately the 433, can you see this? I hope so. The 433 get divided between attacks that ended before the police arrived and attacks that ended after the police arrived. So I'm going to discount the attacks that end after the police arrive because the police are, by definition, good guys with guns, right? And when we have the good guy with a gun debate, we're not talking about whether to arm cops. We arm cops. We're all for arming cops, okay? But let's look now at the data on what happens when an event ends before the police arrive. Of the 433, 249 fell into the category of the attacks having ended before the cops arrived. In the vast majority of them, in 185, maybe that's not a vast majority, but that's a hell of a lot of them, the attacker either leaves the scene himself or commits suicide. So usually what happens is the attacker leaves or the attacker kills himself. Okay, what's left? There are then 64 instances where a bystander does something that ends the attack. 42 of the 64, 42 of the 64, the a third party is able to subdue the attacker, not with a gun. It's a fight, okay? In 42 of the 64, a fight ends up stopping the attacker. What does that leave? 22 times that a good guy with a gun, 22 out of 249, was able to use a gun and stop the attacker. In 3 of them, it's an off-duty cop. In 7 of them, it's a security guard. I'm not counting those in the debate of good guy with a gun because, again, they're law enforcement. The number's 12. 12 times out of the 249, it was a good guy with a gun. What's the point? The point is it happens very rarely. Now, let me anticipate the criticism from a pro-Second Amendment purist. A Second Amendment purist, I assume, would look at that and say, well, Michael, the solution is more people need guns because you just don't know by this data how many actually had a weapon and were in a position to stop it. Give everybody a gun, their argument would be, and that number 12 will be much higher. To which I respond, it's not the Hollywood ending that we see on television. There are plenty of people already with guns, and only in 12 instances out of the 249 where the attack ended before the police arrived, was it a good guy with a gun? And if it only happens that many times, is it worth the risk? Because when the cops arrive on the scene, they don't know who the good guy with a gun is, right? I know it's complicated, but I'm going to get into it today. I did it on radio, but to be able to show this visually on television, I think is going to be a really impactful segment. So with that, thank you for watching on YouTube. Thank you for listening on SiriusXM. Thank you for watching on CNN. Thank you, most importantly, for voting at Smerconish.com on all the daily survey questions. Listen, in my absence on vacation, the newsletter rolls on. Keep voting on the survey questions. Every day the links will change. Every day we will attempt to deliver to you a balanced media diet. Okay? So thank you. By the way, at the end of the summer, big things happening online. I think that's all I'll say. We're in the midst of a massive rebuild, and I hope you're going to like it. Stay safe until I see you again, and thank you very much.